Louisiana Legends is made possible by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana. This informative educational series enables us to discover, through the accomplishments of our fellow Louisianians, the unique character of the state so proudly served by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana for more than 65 years.
In 1995, Lake Charles native Paul Groves won the prestigious Richard Tucker Foundation Award for Aspiring Singers. It was at this point that Paul began to fulfill his dream of becoming a major international operatic tenor with engagements at the world's leading opera houses and concert halls. After attending Louisiana State University, where he studied under Robert Grayson, a renowned singer in his own right, he continued to pursue his vocal studies at the Juilliard Opera Center. In 1991, he achieved national attention as a winner of the Metropolitan Opera House's National Council auditions. A graduate of the Met's Young Artist Development Program, he made his Metropolitan Opera House debut in 1992 as the Stuurman in Die Fliegende Hollander. He has gone on to appear at the Met in many operas, leading to recordings for Dutch Gramophone, Sony, and Decca Records. A recent appearance at the Met in Don Giovanni was broadcast nationally on public television. Paul Groves grew up in a musical household. His father taught music at McNeese University, and his mother was a talented singer. He began singing in choir at church services, and early on it became clear that he had a gifted voice. As a featured soloist, he began to develop the skill and poise that would be needed to perform in front of audiences in the world's best-known opera houses. After leaving Louisiana, his career blossomed, with appearances at the Met leading to engagements in Europe and South America. To date, he has appeared in scores of roles in opera houses around the world. A gifted musician, Paul Groves is continually in demand for recitals and concerts with leading orchestras and conductors. Please join us now for a conversation with American tenor Paul Groves.
It's a cold, wet Wednesday, and I'm in Cameron Parish at the Gros Savant hunting camp. And that's kind of normal for Louisiana, and this is the time of the year for people to be at a hunting camp. But who I'm with is not your everyday hunting camp guest. I'm with Paul Groves, the leading tenor of the Metropolitan Opera, and a native of Lake Charles, Louisiana. Hiya, Paul. Good to be with you.
Nice to be at home.
I bet. How often do you get back, Paul?
I come home about 5 or 6 times a year, usually to visit my family and friends and to go fishing on the fishing boat that I leave here in Lake Charles.
So you will always be a Louisianian?
Oh, yes. I would like to live here if there was a big giant opera company downtown by the lake. But unfortunately there's not, I have to live in New York. Yeah.
Paul, I think that your life can best be summed up at this time when you tell all the people of Louisiana where you're going to be tomorrow night.
Well, tomorrow night I'm flying back this evening to New York, and I have performance at the Metropolitan Opera tomorrow night at 8 o'clock.
I don't want to sound like a teenager, but wow. And it causes you no stress, no concern?
Well, I can't say that, the whole time I've been here, somewhere in the back of my mind I think about, well, I can't really tax myself. If I go duck hunting in the morning like I did yesterday, I have to rest in the afternoon. So when I get back, I'll be in fresh voice, but not really a lot of concern.
Paul, let's start at the beginning. Where did Paul Groves and music become one in Lake Charles, Louisiana?
Well, I always grew up music in my family, my mother's family and my father's family. We had family reunions, we always sang, and I started singing in the church choirs when I was a kid, and I sang in First Methodist Choir here when I was in high school with my mother. And my father was a music professor at McNeese State University and head of the music department at McNeese State University. And I actually started my first 3 years of university. I sang in my father's choir, and I was at McNeese State University, and I got my first performance experience there and some musicals. And then I went to Louisiana State University and studied with my teacher, Bob Grayson, there.
I want to ask you this. What is your earliest memory of someone, either your father or a friend or somebody else who was knowledgeable? All kids sing. But what's your first memory of somebody saying, hey, wait a minute, you might have something?
Well, even in elementary school, when I was in the choir, I always sang solos in the choir. So I guess all of my music teachers recognized that, you know, I was gifted with a voice. So I don't really remember. I just always remember singing. That's something that I did. And most of the people in my family did, but I was always the special one with the best voice.
So you went to Louisiana State, and Grayson, who had been a leading tenor at the New York Opera, became your teacher. Was he very encouraging?
Oh, he was very encouraging. When I first went there, and because I didn't really know a whole lot about opera. I was a singer, and I knew Luciano Pavarotti and Placido Domingo and their recordings, but I really didn't know anything about the business or what kind of technique you should have as a tenor voice, and he was a tenor also. So he really took me under his wing, and he said, this is what you need to do to be a professional singer, and he encouraged me that I could, in fact, have an operatic career, which very few people do. So I just...
Next to impossible, huh?
Well, it is.
It's like kids playing basketball and dreaming of becoming an NBA player.
Yeah, it's like playing in high school and thinking about becoming an NBA player. But I was just gifted, thank God, with all the talents that it takes to be a professional opera singer.
Including a good memory.
Yeah, I have a very good memory, especially if you put melody to words. I can memorize anything in Russian, any kind of language. So I was just gifted
Is an
with that.
extensive repertoire, even for a young singer like yourself, and you are still a young person, is that very important? Is that, I guess it means work?
Yeah, it means a lot of work, but I try to challenge myself by that. I was never one, say, Alfredo Kraus is a famous tenor. He just died a few years ago from cancer, but he was a famous tenor that had a beautiful voice, great style, but he only sang 5 or 6 opera roles his whole life. And he stuck to those and said, I find it challenging enough to find new ways to do these roles for the rest of my life, and I'll just stick with that. I like to challenge myself by doing recitals, learning new recital repertoire, doing concerts, as well as opera. I do mainly opera, but in the breaks in between or in between performances, I like to challenge myself by doing other kinds of repertoire.
What are you, a pure lyric tenor?
Yeah, I would say I'm just pure lyric tenor, like U.C. Björling or Nikolai Gedda. Or
That's
Fritz
not
Wunderlich.
bad, you know.
No. These are people that everyone admires, so.
Paul, okay, so you graduate from LSU, and what's next?
Well, I spent about a year outside of university. I sang with the Cleveland Opera. I did a world premiere there. I went to Italy and studied for 3 weeks in Italy and learned about Italian style, and I studied with some very good Italian teachers there. And then I came back to LSU for the Baton Rouge Opera that year, and I did a performance of Tales of Hoffmann. And then after that, I auditioned for Juilliard Opera Center, because I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, I need to go to New York. And I thought that would be a good way to be introduced to New York in a university setting. And I auditioned for Juilliard in the spring, and then that fall I started Juilliard.
How did you like Juilliard?
Well, I didn't think the vocal department was so wonderful. Luckily, I got assigned to a great teacher, and I still study with her. And most of the famous young American singers have studied with her. As Neil Shikoff, we mentioned, and Susan Graham, and my wife does, Charlotte Helicon. But I didn't think the opera department was was so wonderful as far as training, but it was right next door to the Metropolitan Opera. And I hadn't seen a whole lot of opera performances in my life. And I was able, through Juilliard, to get student tickets, and I went about 3 or 4 times a week, all year long.
Not bad.
And stood in the top standing room, and I saw all of the famous opera singers in the world and conductors do roles there. And I learned quite a bit just from watching and observing.
Now, when did you start entering these lofty competitions, the Met itself's competition, and then perhaps the zenith of that competitive world, the Richard Tucker?
Well, when I entered the Met competition, actually, you know, because it's countrywide, and there's districts. And I think our district here in Louisiana it includes Mississippi and Arkansas and Louisiana, and also Puerto Rico. And when I was at LSU, a couple of years before I went to New York, or maybe 3 years, I entered the competition here in Louisiana. But they only send, you have to win the district, and I won the district, and then they do the regional, which is these 3 states and Puerto Rico. And they only send the winner to New York for the finals. And I came in second to some Puerto Rican tenor that's never been heard of again. And at the time, I was upset that I came in second, you know, because I really wanted to go to New York to finish this competition. But I'm glad I didn't, because I was not ready to go to New York. I would have been lost in the shuffle. Who knows if I would have won. I'm very glad that I had those 3 more years to mature and learn more about my craft. And then when I went to Juilliard, my teacher suggested that I do the Met competition. And she said, why don't you go back to Louisiana, where the competition is much less than here in New York? And
Clever teacher.
And I said, but the judges are probably much better here in New York than they are. And I said, you know, they get judges from the Metropolitan Opera judge here, and they know about young talent. And I said, I'll just do it here. You know, if I can't win here, then I shouldn't do it anyway. And I ended up winning, and I went on and entered. After I won the competition, they invited me to be in the Met Young Artist program.
Which is what exactly?
Well, it lasts 3 years, and they only have about 5 or 6 people at a time. You know, people graduate, and they invite maybe 1 more person a year. And you get to study there. You study languages, and you have coachings, private coachings. You have a pianist every day that plays through repertoire and, you know, advises you what to do. And then you also get to do smaller roles and then understudy the main tenor roles.
Wow.
And I understudied famous tenors. So if they got sick, I was on. And that ended up to be my real debut was in The Flying Dutchman, and I found out a few hours before opening night that the tenor was sick and I was on.
How did you feel?
Well, I'd rehearsed quite a bit, because at the Met, even the understudies rehearse quite a bit. You know, everything is very prepared and professional there. And I'd rehearsed quite a bit, and I knew my music well, and I wasn't nervous at all until 5 minutes before James Levine came into my dressing room.
Oh.
And he said, now don't be nervous. And he said, look, you're great, you'll go out there, you're going to be really wonderful, but don't be nervous. And he kept telling me that, and he left. And then right after that, I was nervous.
Of course.
I went, oh no. But before that, I was just treating it as any other performance. But it went really well. You know, it was great. And I did all the performances.
Paul, how about the Richard Tucker competition?
Well, in the end, the final Richard Tucker prize, the big one, is decided on by committee. They have a committee of, you know, heads of the opera companies all over the U.S., and they decide on the big prize. The competition are for study grants, and 1 week after I won the Met competition, I auditioned for this competition for the Richard Tucker study grant, and I won. So for 5 or 6 years until I won the big prize, they knew who I was, and I talked to them every once in a while, and they'd ask me how my career was going, and you know, I talked to Barry Tucker, Richard's son, who runs the foundation. And then in 1995, they decided to give me the big award. And that was great. It's a huge boost to your career.
You're on your way.
Yeah, and you're on TV and, you know, the Richard Tucker Gala. and it's also a large sum of money.
How much traveling do you do a year?
A lot. I probably take 100 flights a year. I fly a lot. In the past 7 years, I spent most of my time in Europe until, I did one show, maybe 1 or 2 shows in the U.S. a year, and the rest in Europe. There's so many more opera companies there, and they did my repertoire.
And you're booked ahead for how long now?
5 years.
5 years.
Yeah. I have things at the Metropolitan Opera even in 5 years.
Paul,
I don't like to think about those things, though. I just think about what I have to do for the next year, because
or tomorrow night in your case.
There's no reason to think about what I have to do in 5 years.
Paul, do you still practice? I hope I'm not insulting you, but do you still vocalize and do the things that voice students do?
Oh, I do. I still take voice lessons. I have my teacher in New York, who I've had since 1990. And I go back when I come back to town, I go back because you never know. It's just like any other athlete, because we're dealing with muscles here. And you have to have somebody that you trust, and you have to go back to this person to make sure that you haven't gotten on the wrong track. Because if you stay on the right track, you can have a long career. If you have a little deviation, it just builds and builds and snowballs, and then you start to have problems. So
Are you able to tell when it's time to lay off or get some help?
Oh, yeah.
You can?
I'm able to tell when I get tired. I think most singers know when they get tired. It's very easy to tell. And it may take one day that I can still talk, but you just don't sing for that one day, and then rest a lot. A lot of it has to do with rest, because as we all know, if everything having to do with your body affects your voice. If you don't sleep very well, your voice is lower. If you drink alcohol, your voice is lower. If you exert yourself, do a lot of exercising, any of this kind of stuff that tires out your body, tires out your voice.
How about those stratospheric high notes that I know you possess, and they're very much a part of your repertoire? When you sing, it seems so effortless. Are they scary?
Well, some of them are. I did the highest, most terrifying tenor role this summer in Munich. It's I Puritani. Arturo. And on opening night, and it was there, and there were lots of Italians in the audience, and I'd done it previously 5 or 6 years ago in Boston, but, you never know where your voice is after 5 or 6 years, and it's not repertoire that I usually sing. I could sing it, but I don't usually sing this kind of repertoire. I do mostly Mozart and, lighter roles. And I just decided, well, I'm going to try this role. And it is very, very high. There's even a high F above high C that I sang.
Oh.
And on opening night, I do have to tell you that I was more nervous than I've ever been, because I knew that if I cracked or had a little glitch on one of these high notes, people would start to boo.
Good old European audiences.
Yeah. Then I had a lot of high notes to negotiate, but luckily, everything turned out fine and went great.
I suspect that only a few of you all will even undertake that role. It is up there in the...
Oh, yes. Most of the tenors that sang it 3 or 4 years ago have retired it.
Too much.
Yeah. I don't even know of anyone that sings the role these days. Pavarotti sang it for 3 years, and he was the best at it. But he did it for 3 years, and after that, it's just not worth the trouble. It's not worth the anxiety.
Paul, are your compatriots some of the world's great opera singers, most of the world's great opera singers, people like Domingo and Pavarotti and Fleming? Are they nice people, some of them?
Most of them are. I mean, you can catch, every once in a while, singers aren't so nice when they don't feel well and they have to perform, because then especially if you're a Pavarotti or Domingo, because your audience that pays high prices for tickets expect to hear you on your best day. When you go see an opera, you want the person to perform to their best, to the top of their ability. So they know this. And they know their public wants to hear them hold the high note longer, and when they don't feel great and they have this pressure, it's not good to be around these people. It's probably not good to be around me either. My wife says that every once in a while.
How did you meet your wife?
We met in Wolf Trap Opera, which is when I was in the Met Young Artist program, which is it's an opera company for people, Americans, or people that have a green card at least, because my wife she's Swedish, but she has a green card, under the age of 30. And it's the cream of the crop under the age of 30 in the U.S. And you perform roles in the original language in Washington, just outside of Washington, in Virginia. And I did all of my, in 2 years I did most of the Mozart roles I do now, Tamino and Don Giovanni, Così fan tutte, and we met in Così fan tutte. She was doing Dorabella and I was doing Ferrando. And then it's been 9 years and we got married in 1995 in Sweden.
I would think, because both of you are in that world that requires travel, that must not be easy on a marriage.
No, it's not very easy. But when we're together, if we both have time off,
yes,
we spend all day long together.
I see.
We make up for time, or at least we like to believe we do.
How do you relax in New York, which is your base, of course? Like nothing cooking, nothing on the schedule tomorrow. How might you spend the day?
Well, I have lots of friends there that sing at the Met, and we entertain ourselves. We go bowling, play pool, and when it's warmer, a lot of opera singers now are into golf, and I love golf. I've played for years. And my friend Bryn Terfel, and when we were in Don Giovanni, that I just did recently, we would rent a car on days off and drive out to New Jersey or up to Westchester and play golf, about 4 of us, the cast of Giovanni.
And someday, in your case, it's a very long way off, when you decide that you've had enough of a singing career, enough of a professional, what will you do with your life?
I don't really know. But I like to think that I'll know when it's time to quit, because I think so many singers and performers don't know. You know, it's very difficult to know that someone's way past their prime, but they continue. And you like to remember them when they were, the best in the world.
Yes.
But I like to think that I can say, okay, I've had enough. Probably at the age of 50 or 55, after all the singing I've done. And I don't really aspire to be a teacher after that, because I think teaching is also a learned art. It really is. Some people are very gifted to it, but you certainly have to learn. So it would take me another 10 years after that to be a good teacher. I've done master classes. Recently I did one after I gave a recital in Richmond, Virginia. And I had a master class, and the 4 students got up to sing, and I didn't really know what to tell them. I can only tell them about my own experience.
It's just maybe not your trade, huh?
Yeah. Well, I would have to study and learn how to be a teacher.
Well, on behalf of all of the people of this beloved state, and I'm so pleased that you love Louisiana and love to come back, on behalf of all of us, I want to thank you for sparing some of your precious time, and to wish you good singing, and be assured that those of us back here who are so very proud of you and that you're one of us, we will very much be in your corner.
Well,
and I thank you, sir.
Thank you, Gus.
Louisiana Legends is made possible by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana. This informative educational series enables us to discover, through the accomplishments of our fellow Louisianians, the unique character of the state so proudly served by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana for more than 65 years.
For a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or go online to www.lpb.org.